Hello everyone, today I will continue telling the story of the single mother, Lytieuca. After a long night curled up in the corner of the cave, the chill seeping into her very bones, Lytieuca awoke with a start to the sound of the wind slipping through the rock walls, whistling softly like a weary sigh. The first faint rays of dawn slipped through a crack in the stone, delicate as strands of silver brushing against her thin shoulders. Outside, a white mist blanketed the world, gathering in droplets on her tangled hair and the faded hem of her clothes, worn pale by years of wind and rain. The cold of the mountains had become a familiar companion now, no longer making her shiver as it had in the beginning. She rubbed her eyes, breathing in the earthy scent of damp stone mixed with the faint smoke from yesterday's fire. Bending down to coax the embers back to life, she placed on the fire the cassava roots she had worked so hard to dig up the day before. The flames danced and the thin smoke curled around her gaunt face, revealing eyes that were both resolute and quietly weary. This morning, Lytieuca rose earlier than usual, not to gather firewood or forage for food, but to reach the sawmill in town, where the manager had promised her work. From the cave to the town was a long trek, over slippery slopes, along narrow paths littered with sharp stones and scratched by thorns. Every step was a test of her strength, but thoughts of a few kilos of rice and packets of instant noodles kept her lips pressed tight and her feet moving faster. When she arrived, the manager, a sturdy, middle-aged woman with a stern yet warm gaze, greeted her with a kind smile. She handed Lytieuca a pair of worn gloves and showed her how to stack the planks neatly, without warping. The sharp whine of the saw bit through the air, the scent of fresh sap stung her nose, and the heat of the noon sun thickened the air. Sweat dotted her brow and ran down her back, but she kept at it without a word of complaint. Her calloused fingers, hardened from seasons of digging soil, now stung from the rough edges of the wood, yet her eyes stayed fixed on her work, each movement precise and careful. Every time she finished stacking a pile of planks, she would take a step back, straighten her back, and draw in a deep breath. Sweat mixed with sawdust in her hair, dripping onto the workshop floor. But as the stack of planks grew taller, she felt a lightness inside her, as if each plank was building a little more hope for her life. When the lunch whistle blew, her hand was still resting on the last plank. Her arms ached, but there was a quiet pride in her chest. At least for today, she had given her all. While the others gathered around steaming bowls of rice and soup, Lytieuca found a shady corner, opened her frayed cloth bag, and took out roasted cassava that still carried the faint scent of charcoal. She ate slowly, stretching out the meager meal. The manager passed by, paused briefly, and left without a word. But moments later, she returned with a hot lunch box and a cool bottle of water, setting them down before her. "Eat some more. Working all day on cassava alone won't keep you going." Lytieuca looked up, managing a small smile, her eyes bright with gratitude, and nodded in thanks. It had been so long since such a simple meal had warmed her heart. In the afternoon, the hammering, the sawing, and the footsteps blended into an unending rhythm. When the day's work was over, the manager handed her a few crisp bills. The sum wasn't much, but for Lytieuca, it was like a small lantern lighting the days ahead. On her way back, she stopped at a small shop to buy a few packets of instant noodles, the cheapest way to fill her stomach for the cold nights. By the time she reached the cave, the sky had turned deep purple. She chopped a few bamboo stalks, split them to make bowls, and dropped the noodles into boiling water with a pinch of salt. The bubbling of the pot mingled with the sound of the wind rushing through the mountain pass, like a familiar song of her life here. Inside the dark cave, the firelight cast a calm glow over Lytieuca's face. She ate each spoonful of noodles in silence, no fear, no complaint. Only the quiet of someone long accustomed to solitude, yet steadfast in keeping her life moving forward. That night, in the stillness of the deep forest, her small figure by the fire glowed like a stubborn flame in the vast darkness, a light the howling mountain winds could never put out. The next morning, mountain mist still clung to the treetops, blanketing the narrow path leading out of the cave. Overhead, the pale light of dawn was just enough to draw a faint line between the shadowy mountains and the blue-gray sky. Tuna splashed her face with icy stream water, the cold stinging her hands, then wrapped a few simple belongings in her worn cloth bag. Without stopping to eat, she hurried toward the sawmill. The whine of saws and the rhythmic pounding of hammers carried from afar, familiar sounds, yet today they seemed heavier. She began work as usual, lifting thick planks, stacking them neatly as instructed, aligning each edge precisely. Each thin board she placed felt as though she were trying to arrange a small piece of her life into order. But after only a few rounds, a light dizziness began to creep in. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just fatigue. Yet the dull nausea quickly spread, forcing her to steady herself against the table. Her vision blurred, and waves of discomfort twisted her stomach. Just a little longer, she told herself, bending down to continue. But the dizziness surged, the sound of saws and hammers fading as if sinking into thick fog. In that moment, the world before her went black. A startled shout rang out, followed by hurried footsteps. The manager rushed over, shaking her gently and calling her name, but she didn't respond. A few workers sprinted to the gate to fetch the owner. Minutes later, a man in his 40s appeared, tall, neatly dressed, his calm features marked by a decisive gaze. Without asking questions, he signaled for the others to step aside, bent down, and lifted Tuna into his arms, carrying her straight to the pickup truck parked outside. The truck rolled along the red dirt road toward town, the hum of the engine blending with the whistle of the wind through the windows. At the clinic, the nurse quickly ushered her into the examination room. The man stood in the hallway, eyes following every movement of the medical staff, concern etched into his otherwise composed face. Moments later, the door opened. The nurse stepped out, holding the results, and leaned closer to speak softly. "She is pregnant." He paused, brows knitting. "But I'm not her husband, Anne." "I know," the nurse replied gently, "but she needs rest and better care." Without hesitation, he pulled out his wallet, paying all examination and medication costs. Before leaving, he placed a business card on the reception desk, instructing the nurse, "If there's any problem, call me immediately." When she woke, Tuna saw the bed beside her was empty. A nurse told her a man had brought her in, paid all the bills, and left. She managed a brief thank you before requesting discharge. Back in the cave, Tuna sat motionless before the fire, its glow casting shadows over her tired face. The nurse's words echoed in her mind, "You are pregnant." Her hand instinctively rested on her stomach, a wave of confusion and fear flooding in. Memories of her ex-husband's cold eyes and her mother-in-law's cruel words cut into her like a blade. Now, on top of the pain of being abandoned, she faced a new reality, a small life growing inside her. Should I tell him? She wondered. But then she imagined the sneers, the denial, perhaps another round of humiliation. That afternoon, while the sawmill CEO was surveying a nearby forest, he came across a hidden trail leading to a secluded cave. Curious, he stepped inside. Light filtering through a crack in the rock revealed signs of life, a cold fire pit, a few crude bamboo utensils, and in the dim corner, the still figure of a person. Taking a few more steps, he recognized the face. "It's you?" His voice was deep, tinged with surprise. Startled, Tuna turned, her eyes wide with caution. "Why, are you here?" She stepped back, like a small bird sensing the shadow of a hawk overhead. He didn't move closer, only stood still, his gaze seeming to search her eyes both strong and trembling, as if trying to read a story he had never imagined. The man stopped right at the entrance of the cave, his eyes flickering with both surprise and suspicion. He stayed silent for a few beats, then gave a faint smile, breaking the tense air hanging between them. "So, we've met before. Do you remember? That day on the bridge, I asked after you. And this morning, it was I who took you to the clinic." Tuna froze for a moment. She looked straight at him, her gaze probing as though trying to lift a veil of fog from her memory. Within seconds, the image sharpened, that face, that voice, it was him. A brief flicker of embarrassment crossed her expression, but she quickly lowered her gaze, hiding it away. He didn't rush toward her. Instead, he chose a rock opposite her to sit on, keeping a respectful distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. "Do you live here alone? Where is your home? I can take you back." She pressed her lips together, her fingers lacing tightly, her voice so low it nearly dissolved into the wind. "I don't have a home anymore." The words, though softly spoken, felt like a dull blade slowly cutting into the mind of the listener. After a long stretch of silence, she began to speak. Her tone didn't tremble, yet beneath it lay a mass of accumulated pain, years as a childless daughter-in-law, looked down upon by her mother-in-law, her husband growing ever more distant. Until one day, he brazenly brought another woman into their home, treating her presence as if she were a useless object. On a cold, rainy night, she was thrown out onto the street with only a few clothes and a worn cloth bag, without a single word of farewell. The man listened quietly, eyes narrowing slightly, never interrupting. At last, he spoke in a low voice. "You can't keep living in this cave. Here, your health, and the babies, will be at risk. It would be best to find somewhere safer, or, if there's still a chance, tell your husband about this." His words left Tuna in silence. Inside her, emotions surged like opposing tides, fear mingled with the faintest trace of hope. He stood, leaving her with a short message before walking away. "If you need help, contact me." His figure quickly disappeared into the mist, leaving her sitting at the cave's entrance, her eyes following with hesitation. That night, by the flickering firelight, his advice kept echoing in her mind. She told herself, even if he no longer loves me, this child is still his. I can't let my baby be born without acknowledgement. The next morning, she descended the mountain. Each step seemed longer as the path to her old village came into view. At the entrance to the alley where her husband lived, she stood for a long while. Laughter drifted from inside, his voice mingled with that of another woman. She took a deep breath and forced herself to walk in. The moment she appeared, her mother-in-law's brows knitted tightly, her voice sharp. "What are you doing back here?" Before she could answer, her husband cut in coldly. "I told you, don't come back." She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. I have something to say. I'm pregnant." The words froze the room for a heartbeat, then her husband's mocking laugh shattered the stillness. "Pregnant? You think I'd believe that? That child, how do I even know it's mine?" Her mother-in-law immediately chimed in, dripping with scorn. "Shameless. Making up such a lie just to come back here." Tuna's breath caught in her chest. She had braced herself for doubt, but the naked cruelty cut deeper than she'd imagined. No matter how she explained, they stood firm in driving her out. The door slammed shut, the click of the lock ringing cold in the air, leaving her alone in the narrow alley. Dusk settled in, the chill wind slipping through her thin clothes. No matter how she pleaded, their eyes did not waver. In the end, her feet carried her back along the familiar path, the road leading out of the village, back to the darkness of the cave. But this time, her steps were heavier, for she carried with her a new wound, deeper and more searing than ever before. Tears streamed down Tuna's face, hot as they traced her cheeks, yet leaving an icy sting deep in her heart. She could not comprehend how the man who had shared a home with her for so many years, and the mother-in-law she had cared for so devotedly, from meals to bedtime, could turn their backs so cruelly. The night she had stayed awake, watching over her mother-in-law's fragile breathing during illness, the carefully prepared dinners laid out each evening, now they were nothing but shards of broken glass, cutting her heart each time she remembered. The road back to the cave felt twice as long. Her legs were exhausted, but the heaviest weight was in her chest. On a deserted stretch of the path, she stopped, gently resting both hands on her belly. Her voice trembled, choked with emotion. "My child, even if the whole world turns its back, I will still be here with you. I promise." When she finished, she leaned against a tree trunk, closing her eyes. The earthy scent of damp soil mixed with the morning breeze, the rustling leaves lulling her into a hazy slumber. Days of pent-up exhaustion pressed her eyelids down. Suddenly, a familiar male voice reached her, pulling her from the edge of sleep. "Tuna?" She opened her eyes, and in front of her stood the CEO of the sawmill, his eyes filled with genuine concern, not curiosity, not polite formality, but care that came from the heart. Hearing her recount how her family had rejected the child and driven her away, his expression darkened. He remained silent for a long moment, as if weighing something in his mind. "It's too dangerous here," his voice deep and deliberate, each word falling heavy. "If something were to happen, no one would even know to help you. You cannot stay in that cave any longer." He bent down and gently helped her to her feet. Together they followed a narrow winding path through dense shrubs until a lush green garden opened before them. In the middle stood a small wooden house, its roof sagging in places, its walls weathered by sun and rain, but surrounded by fruit trees heavy with ripening harvest. A soft breeze stirred the wildflowers at the edges, making them sway as if welcoming their new occupant. "This house is a bit old," he said with a gentle but resolute smile, "but with a little cleaning, it will be perfectly livable. Stay here for now, that way, I can have peace of mind." Tuna stood still, looking around, feeling as though a ray of sunlight had pierced the darkest corner of her heart. "Behind the house there's a coop with some chickens and ducks. If you like, you can raise a few more animals. The orchard is in season, you can pick the fruit to eat or sell." His words were more than an offer, they felt like a ticket back to a normal life she thought she had lost. His sincere eyes and steady voice made her heart tremble with emotion. "Thank you, truly, thank you so much. Meeting someone like you is worth far more than the man I once called my husband." He simply gave a faint smile, saying nothing. He walked around the house, checking the doors, the roof, the yard, as if making sure everything was safe enough for her and the baby. And Tuna, standing in the middle of the yard, listening to the wind and the leaves, felt her chest grow light for the first time in many months. This place, small and worn though it was, felt like the warm home she had long yearned to return to in the midst of life's storm. As soon as she arrived at her new home, Tuna didn't allow herself a moment's rest. The wooden house before her, though old, with a slightly crooked roof and weathered walls, was a world apart from the dark, damp cave she had known, a roof to shield her from rain and sun, for walls to keep out the wind, and only a faint musty smell that a bit of cleaning and sunshine could easily chase away. She gently placed a hand on her belly, speaking in a voice thick with emotion as if confiding in her unborn child. "My dear, we found a decent place to live. Thanks to this kind man, from now on we won't have to curl up against the wind and rain anymore." She began outside in the yard. Dry leaves and fallen branches were gathered into neat piles, swept to one corner, and set alight. White smoke rose into the air, mingling with the gentle fragrance of wildflowers in the garden, creating a cool, peaceful scent. Inside, each wooden plank was wiped clean of long-settled dust. Cobwebs strung across corners were cleared away, forgotten belongings were neatly arranged. The room slowly brightened, not only from sunlight slipping through the gaps in the walls, but from the warmth of a pair of hands quietly setting every detail in order. When the yard was still unfinished, Tuna took a narrow path into the forest to find young banana leaves. Her movements were quick and decisive, left hand gripping the stalk, right hand slicing cleanly, the leaves falling with a crisp swish to the ground. The familiar motion brought back memories of her days in the countryside, when tending animals and gardens was a natural part of life, before everything was swept into the harsh tide of marriage. In town, the CEO still couldn't rest easy. The image of a pregnant woman living in an empty house played over and over in his mind. Thinking of her sleeping on the hard, cold wooden floor, he decided he couldn't let that happen. He stopped by a shop and chose a new mattress, along with a few essential items, a kettle for making tea or cooking something quickly, a light blanket for chilly nights, and a small pot set just right for one person. When he returned, he found Tuna resting under the shade of a tree, her hair damp with sweat, plastered to her forehead, but her face glowing with the satisfaction of a day's work. He set the mattress and items down on the porch, speaking gently but firmly. "I brought you these, so you can sleep better, more comfortably. Think of it as my support, so you can feel at ease taking care of the garden and farm for me." Tuna froze for a moment, her hands clasping her belly, her eyes a mix of shyness and deep gratitude. "I truly don't know how to thank you. You've helped me so much already." He smiled faintly. "Taking good care of this place is thanks enough for me." After he left, Tuna stood for a long time, gazing at the new mattress, a strange feeling swelling in her chest. She bent down, letting her hand run over its soft surface, and without realizing it, a tear rolled down her cheek. For the first time in months, she didn't feel abandoned. That night, she used the small amount of rice she had left to cook a pot of plain porridge. There was no side dish, yet the steaming bowl tasted far better than the dry cassava or uncooked noodles she had once choked down in the cave. As night fell, she lay on the new mattress, listening to the chorus of insects in the garden and the faint scent of flowers drifting through the window. For the first time, she slept deeply, warm, safe, and free from the nights of shivering in the cold.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì đây là 1 phút cuối ở video mà mình là chủ của kênh muốn chia sẻ một chút tới mọi người. Thì kênh của mình cũng hoạt động một thời gian trên YouTube rồi, cũng rất may mắn là nhận được sự giúp đỡ cũng như là ủng hộ của mọi người. Thì kênh của mình hiện tại thì cũng đã làm được một thời gian. Mình hy vọng rằng trong thời gian tới và những video tiếp theo vẫn sẽ nhận được sự ủng hộ và yêu quý của mọi người. Và mình mong rằng mình sẽ nhận được nhiều ý kiến đóng góp cũng như yêu thương từ mọi người để ngày càng có thể cải tiến và giúp cho kênh ngày càng hoàn thiện hơn, cũng như là mình cũng sẽ cố gắng hoàn thiện hơn. Và mọi người ơi, nếu như mà yêu quý kênh, quý các nhân vật thì hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Và nếu như mọi người yêu quý kênh mình cũng như yêu quý các nhân vật thì hãy chia sẻ video đến những người khác để mọi người cũng có thể xem được những video hay và ý nghĩa này nha.